The faded serpent tattoo wrapped around Lena Brooks' forearm had been the source of countless jokes at Camp Pendleton. New recruits would snicker, calling it a garage special, or worse. But when Colonel Vincent Nash caught sight of that same mark during a routine inspection, his face went white as desert sand. Without hesitation, he stripped off his jacket, revealing an identical tattoo on his shoulder. "She's not logistics," he whispered to his aide, his voice trembling. "She's former Unit Meridian. Only 6 of us made it out alive." The California sun beat down mercilessly on the motor pool at Camp Pendleton, casting harsh shadows between the rows of military vehicles that stretched across the compound like metal monuments to American might. Lena Brooks wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her grease-stained hand, leading a dark smudge across her forehead as she bent back over the engine of a Humvee that had been giving the mechanics trouble for 3 days. Straight. The sound of her wrench clicking against metal rang out in steady rhythm, punctuated by the distant shouts of drill instructors putting recruits through their paces on the nearby parade ground. At 28, Lena had settled into a comfortable routine of anonymity within the sprawling military base. She arrived each morning at 0630 hours, punched her time card, and disappeared into the maze of vehicles where she could work in relative peace. Her colleagues knew her as reliable, competent, and refreshingly drama-free. A woman who could diagnose engine problems with an almost supernatural intuition, and who never complained about the long hours or the back-breaking work that came with keeping hundreds of military vehicles operational. What they didn't know, what nobody at Camp Pendleton suspected, was that Lena Brooks had once been someone entirely different. The woman who now spent her days elbow-deep in engine grease had previously moved through shadows in places most people couldn't pronounce, carrying out missions that would never appear in any official military record. The transformation from that life to this one had been deliberate, calculated, and absolutely necessary for her survival. The tattoo on her left forearm served as both a reminder and a burden, a piece of permanent ink that connected her to a past she had worked desperately to leave behind. The design itself appeared deceptively simple, a minimalist serpent coiled around a compass rose, rendered in fading black ink that suggested it had been applied years ago by someone who valued function over artistry. To the casual observer, it looked like the kind of tattoo a young person might get on impulse, perhaps during a wild weekend in some military town where tattoo parlors stayed open late to catch sailors and Marines looking to commemorate their service with permanent reminders etched into their skin. The reality was far more complex and infinitely more dangerous. Private Rodriguez was the first to comment on it, barely 3 weeks into his deployment to Camp Pendleton. Fresh out of boot camp, with the kind of cockiness that only came from surviving 13 weeks of controlled hell, he spotted the tattoo while Lena was reaching into the engine compartment of his unit's transport vehicle. "Nice ink, Brooks," he said with a smirk that suggested he found the whole thing amusing. "Did you lose a bet or something? That thing looks like it was done with a ballpoint pen." Lena didn't look up from her work, her fingers continuing to probe the engine's innards with practiced efficiency. "It's functional," she replied simply, her voice carrying the kind of flat disinterest that usually discouraged further conversation. But Rodriguez was young, and hadn't yet learned to read the subtle warning signs that more experienced Marines recognized instinctively.